When I was young, every visit to my grandmother's ancient, creaking house in the countryside was an adventure tinged with a hint of terror. The house, surrounded by gnarled old trees and thickets that whispered secrets when the wind blew, seemed pulled from a Gothic tale. My grandmother, a stoic woman with piercing gray eyes and a habit of staring into the distance as if seeing through time, had an assortment of stories to tell. These weren't your ordinary bedtime stories. They were tales that would make your skin crawl. One autumn evening, as a storm brewed in the distance, bringing intermittent flashes of lightning that cast monstrous shadows on the walls, she began a tale unlike any other. As the fire crackled in the hearth, she told me of the hidden room in her house, a room I had never seen. In this very house, beneath where we sit, is a room that has not been opened in over 100 years, she began, her voice as grave as the look in her eyes. Your great-great-grandfather built this house, and with it a room he locked and forbade anyone to enter, not even your great-grandmother. He carried the key with him to his grave. Legend has it that he trapped something in there, something not of this world. My eyes widened, both intrigued and frightened. "What's in there, Grandma?" I asked, unable to hide my trembling voice. "That, my child, is the mystery," she whispered, leaning closer. "Many have heard sounds, whispers, scratching, and cries in the dead of night coming from beneath the floorboards. Some say it's the wind, others believe it might be the thing left stewing in its eternal prison." That night, the storm hit with full force, rattling the windows and howling like a banshee around the eaves. As lightning illuminated the house, my curiosity overcame my fear. I asked her, "Can't we just open it and see?" Grandmother looked at me, her expression unreadable in the flickering firelight. "Some doors are meant to stay closed, child, but if you wish, I can show you where it is. What you decide after that." Her voice trailed off into the stormy night. Creeping behind her with a lantern in my shaking hand, we navigated the narrow, creaky corridors of her house. She stopped in front of an old rug in the dining room, pulling it back to reveal a trapdoor I had never noticed before. "This is as far as I go," she stated solemnly, handing me the lantern. "The rest is up to you." As I write this, the trapdoor lies open at my feet, a gaping maw leading into darkness. The storm outside mirrors the turmoil in my heart. Should I venture down and uncover the secrets held tight by generations, or heed the unspoken warnings woven through Grandma's tales? Tomorrow, I will decide. With the storm thrashing against the house as if eager to unearth its secrets alongside me, I stood frozen at the entrance to the hidden room. The howling wind seemed to whisper caution, yet the allure of the unknown tugged at my curiosity with an almost physical force. Taking a deep breath, I descended into the darkness, the lantern's feeble light barely piercing the thick blackness that filled the stairway like a tangible substance. Each step creaked underfoot, sounding unnervingly like cautious footsteps echoing my own. The air grew colder as I reached the bottom, the back of my neck tingling with the unmistakable sensation of being watched. Before me lay a long, narrow corridor lined with dust and cobwebs, untouched by time or cleaners. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the distant, muffled tumult of the storm and my own ragged breathing. I ventured forward, the air growing denser, as if the darkness itself were trying to smother the light from my lantern. Halfway down the corridor, I paused. The faint, unmistakable sound of scratching came from the end of the hall. It was rhythmic, deliberate, like something or someone was etching marks into the stone walls. Compelled by a force I couldn't resist, I moved closer. The scratching grew louder, more frantic. My hand trembled, spilling flickering shadows across the ancient walls. Then abruptly, the sound ceased. Silence fell so heavy I could hear my heartbeat thudding in my ears. I reached the end of the corridor, where an old wooden door stood slightly ajar. The air here was markedly colder, and I could see my breath clouding in the dim light. Pushing the door open, I peered inside. The room was small, the walls lined with shelves filled with old jars, books, and strange artifacts that my eyes could barely make out. In the center of the room, a large dusty book lay open on a pedestal. Drawn to it, I approached and glanced at the page. It was filled with what appeared to be a diary entry, dated over a century ago, written in a hurried, shaky script. The words were chilling. "It must not be released. I have sealed it here where no one will find it. If you are reading this, leave now. It seeks a new keeper, and it will not let you go easily." A chill ran down my spine as the lantern flickered violently, threatening to go out. I heard a soft whisper behind me, a sibilant voice that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. "Stay with us." I spun around, the light swinging wildly, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to writhe and twist along the walls. But there was nothing, only the empty room and the lingering echo of that whisper. Heart pounding, I turned back to the book, desperate to read more, to understand. But before I could, the sound of heavy, dragging footsteps began to approach from the dark corridor. Slow, deliberate, getting closer. I should run, flee back up the stairs to the safety of the light, but my feet wouldn't move, as if the cold had seeped into my bones, rooting me to the spot. The footsteps continued, relentless. As the sound drew nearer, the air grew so cold that ice formed on the edges of the jars and books, creeping across the floor towards me. The footsteps halted abruptly, just outside the door. My breath caught in my throat, the icy fear rooting me to the spot. The lantern flickered one last desperate time before dying out, plunging me into darkness. My eyes strained against the black, and I could sense something standing in the doorway, an oppressive presence that sucked the warmth from the air. For a moment, everything was silent, except for my pounding heart. Then a cold hand gripped my shoulder. I spun around, throwing my arms up defensively, but grasped only air. The chilling touch was gone as quickly as it had appeared, yet the feeling of dread intensified. I fumbled in my pocket for the matches I'd brought, my hands shaking uncontrollably. Striking one, the small flame seemed an affront to the enveloping darkness, which recoiled as if alive. The light revealed the room once more, unchanged and eerily silent. The door remained ajar, nothing visible in the empty corridor. With the matchstick burning down to my fingers, I hurriedly lit the lantern again, its glow steadying my nerves slightly. I turned my attention back to the book. I had to know what was being kept here, what my ancestor had feared so greatly. The pages were brittle under my fingers as I turned them, each whisper of movement sounding unnaturally loud. I came to an entry that made my blood run cold. I have bound it, but at great cost. My soul is tethered to this room, a guardian against its escape. Whoever you are, finish what I could not. Free me and seal it away forever. A plan began to form in my mind, reckless but driven by an inexplicable need to end this nightmare. The book detailed a ritual, one that required closing the circle my ancestor had opened. It was dangerous, the scribbles warned, but it was the only way. I gathered the items listed, salt, a silver knife, and a mirror from the shelves. Each object felt infused with a cold energy, as if reluctant to be used. I placed them around the open book, forming a makeshift altar. As I prepared to start the ritual, the whisper returned, this time a cacophony of voices, pleading, threatening, cajoling. "Do not bind us again," they hissed. freedom. Ignoring them, I began the incantations. The air grew thick, the shadows twisting violently as if in pain. The temperature dropped so drastically that frost spread across the mirror, obscuring my reflection. Mid-chant, the ground shook, and I nearly lost my balance. A deep, resonant growl echoed through the room, and the presence I felt at the door earlier surged forward. Fear surged through me, but I continued, voice cracking as I spoke the final words. The growl turned into a shriek, and then, as suddenly as it had begun, silence fell. The oppressive presence receded. Tentatively, I reached out, touching the mirror. It was warm, the frost melting away under my fingers. I had done it, or so I thought. Turning to leave, I felt a sharp pain in my chest. Looking down, I saw the silver knife handle protruding, the blade buried deep. A shadowy figure, indistinct and flickering like candle flame, stood behind me. "Thank you," it whispered, voice echoing with a hollow sadness. "You have freed me, but the circle requires a new keeper." As my vision dimmed, I realized the truth. There was no escape from this room. Not truly. The house needed its guardian, and I had unwittingly volunteered. The last thing I saw before darkness claimed me was the door to the hidden room swinging slowly shut, the echo of the closing latch, a final, chilling farewell. Thank you for listening to my channel.